Welcome to day 7. Homework for tonight, you got packet page 37. Notice it's just one page. And we've got a warm-up. So if you could pause the video right here, go ahead, do the warm-up. And eventually it'll ask you for your answer. Now note in your answer, you should give the equation. And when you have to do the squareds, you can just do the caret and then the 2. And then you also need to state what the center and the radius are. So again, pause the video right now, and after you hit play again, it'll pop up for you to put your answer. All right, so we want to group the x's together. X squared minus 20x plus blank. We'll figure that out. We've got plus y squared plus 16y plus blank. And then we want to get our constants over to the other side. So this is going to equal minus 43. To complete the square, we always do b divided by 2 and square it. Our general form of something that's quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c. So b is the part that's in front of the plain old x or the plain old y. So we're going to have negative 20 over 2 squared. Negative 20 divided by 2 is negative 10. Negative 10 squared is 100. So we'll also add 100 to the other side. For the y's, we're going to have 16 over 2 squared. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 8 times 8 is 64. So we'll add 64 to the other side. Adding up on the right will give us 121. And on the left, we're going to have our x part squared plus our y part squared. And remember, the quick way to figure out what goes in there is whatever you squared. Well, let's look up here. We did negative 20 divided by 2 is negative 10, and then negative 10 got squared. So that means negative 10 should go in here. Over in the other one, we did 16 divided by 2 is 8, and then we squared the 8. So that means plus 8 should go in here. So that is one part of your answer to the warm-up. The other part, our center, is the opposite signs of those. So we have 10 comma negative 8. And this is your radius squared. So if you do the square root of 121, that'll give us the radius is 11. Moving over to the homework, standard form is when we want it all multiplied out and on the same side. So write the x minus 4 twice, FOIL it out. Plus, write the y plus 1 twice, FOIL it out. And then we'll subtract the 16 over. When we do that, you usually put the x's and y squared first, then the x, negative 8x plus 2y after that, and then your constant. And again, that's called standard form of a circle. If a point is going to be on any equation, not just a circle equation, any equation, that means when you sub it in, it should check out. So all we do is we're going to sub in 7 for x and y. Well, that'll give us 10 being squared in the first parenthesis and 2 being squared in the second parenthesis. 10 squared is 100, 2 squared is 4. When you add them together, you get 104, and it checks out. So that means yes, 7, 7 is on the circle. So we have a diameter, and those are our endpoints. So like here's A, here's B. To find the center, it's going to be the midpoint. So like we've seen in earlier in the units, we've got to add the x's, divide by 2. Add the y's, divide by 2, and that gives us 2, negative 2. So that's our center. So that's half of what we need to know for the circle. Well, then the radius is just the distance from the center to some point on the circle. So I chose to use the center and A. So over here, to find the radius, I did the distance formula for the center in A. So again, something we've seen in this unit. When you do that, you get square root of 41. So our center we always put in with the opposite signs. So that's why we have x minus 2 in parentheses squared plus y plus 2 parentheses squared. And then this is your radius squared. When you square a square root, it's just the number underneath, because square root of 41 times square root of 41 would just be 41. So standard form, just get everything over on the same side. So add the y squared, subtract the 64. Make sure your squareds come first, then your x and y, and then your constant, and have it equal to 0. So that's your standard form. To put it in center radius form, we do like we did in the warm-up. So add the 64 over, group the x's and y's together. We've got to do our b over 2 squared. So that'll give us 4 squared, so add 16 to both sides. For the y's, do your b over 2 squared. That'll give us negative 1 squared, so we get 1. Make sure if you're doing those in the calculator, you're always putting it in parentheses when you square it. So if we add up the right side, we get 81. And when we go to factor, 4 is really what's got squared for the x's. That's why we have x plus 4. Negative 1 is really what got squared for the y's. That's why we have y minus 1. And then we have 81. It did not ask for it, but our center would have been negative 4, 1, and our radius would have been 9 if we had to tell that. And same idea in 5. So following the same process, you got your standard form there, and then you got your center radius form. Negative 112 would have been the center if they had asked for it, which they didn't, and the radius would have been 5 if they had asked for it. So we're going to start today on page 35, and our topic today is partitioning a segment. So partitioning just means dividing into parts. So if you're given a grid with this, it's always helpful to plot it. So let's plot the negative 3, 3 for point A and the 12, 13 for point B. And then once you have those, take your calculator cover or some other straight edge and connect the 2 points. So we want to now find the coordinates that's 1/5 of the distance from A. So the thing you'll always want to focus on is the fraction and from which point. So we're going to go 1/5 from A. So what we do is we start at A and see what would be the total movements to get to B. Well, to go from A to B, we've got to move some amount to the right, and we've got to move some amount up. So you can do this by either looking at your numbers or counting. So you can either start at A and count how many you're going to the right, or we could look at the x values. Because if you're going to the right, focusing on the x values, because those go left and right. So starting at negative 3 and then going over to 12 would mean we're moving right 15. Because it would be 3 to get to the y-axis and then 12 more. Now for the y's, you could either count up to B to see how many, or notice for the y's, we're starting at 3 and going to 13. So that would be up 10. So that's the first step to see how much you would move from one endpoint to the other. And you got to always start from the point that we wanted the fraction from. If it had said 1/5 from B, then we would have went left 15 and down 10, because we would want to go from B to A. Well, now all we do is we multiply those movements by the fraction we have. So we're going to do 15 times 1/5. And we're going to do 10 times 1/5. And those can be done right in the calculator. So 15 times a fifth would just give us 3. and 10 times a fifth would just give us 2. So this tells us how we should move from point A. Well, when you move left or right, that should always apply to the x value. Moving to the right is the positive direction, so that's when you would add to the x value. Moving to the left is the negative direction, so that's when you would subtract from the x value. Well, our current x value is -3. We wanted to move right 3, so we'll just add 3 to that, and that tells us our new x value is 0. For y's, when you move up, that's in the positive direction, so you'd be adding. When you move down, that's in the negative direction, so you'd be subtracting. We're moving up 2, so we're going to start with a's y value. Okay, that's just coming from right there. Then add the 2 that we want to move up, so that tells us our new y value is going to be 5. So this is our point that is 1/5 of the distance from point A on our line segment. Then one last thing you want to do is just look at your picture and make sure that point is actually on the line. That'll tell you if you have a reasonable answer. Well, here's 0, 5. Yeah, it is on the line, so it looks like our answer is something reasonable. If you get a point that's not on your line segment, then you know you did something wrong. Just so we don't have to scroll up and down, I'm going to rewrite the points down here. So next we want the point that is 3/5 of the distance from A. So we need to focus on what fraction and from what point. Well, because we're starting from A and going to B, it's going to be the same movements as before. We're still going right 15 and up 10. The difference this time is we're going to multiply each of those by 3/5. So again, we can do those in the calculator. 15 times 3/5 will just give us 9. 10 times 3/5 will just give us 6. So this means from point A, we should move right 9 and up 6. So start with A's x value. If you're moving to the right, that's in the positive direction, so we're going to add 9. -3 plus 9 will give us 6 for our x value. A's y value was 3. If we're moving up 6, that's in the positive direction, so we'll be adding 6. 3 plus 6 just gives us 9 for our new point. After you get your point, just checking see if it seems reasonable. 6, 9 is on our line, so that does seem reasonable. Next up, we're going to do 3/5 of the distance from B. So again, you want to focus on your fraction and from what point. Well, now we're starting from B. When we went from A, we went right 15 and up 10. So if we're starting from B, we've got to go left 15 and down 10. So that's why it's important to note which one you're starting from. So we're going to go left, and we'll do 15 times 3/5. We'll go down, we'll do 10 times 3/5. Well, from the last problem, we know 15 times 3/5 is just 9, and 10 times 3/5 is just 6. B's original point was 12, 13. So let's start with our x value of 12. This time we're moving left 9. Well, when you move to the left, that is the negative direction for x's. Moving to the left should be smaller. So this means we will subtract 9 now. So 12 minus 9 will give us 3. Starting with B's y value of 13, we're going down 6. So down, we would want to subtract. So 13 minus 6 will give us 7. And then let's just focus, or let's check and make sure that that seems reasonable. Here's 3, 7. So that's on the line, so that does seem reasonable. Now with any of these, you could do the opposite fraction from the other point. So if you're 3/5 from point B, You could also think of that as 2/5 from A. So let's just show you that you would get the same answer for that. So if we're going from A, we would have been going right 15 and up 10. So we would have 15 times 2/5, which would tell us right 6. We would have 10 times 2/5, which would tell us up 4. A's original point, remember, was negative 3, 3. So we would do negative 3. We're going to the right, so we would add 6. So that's going to give us positive 3. And starting with the y value of 3, going up, we would add 4, and that gives us 7. So notice you get the same answer as we did for that. So there's always going to be two options of how you could do it. Okay, 3/5 from B is the same as saying 2/5 from A. So if one seems like it's easier than the other, you could always do the other. All right, we want 1/4 of the way along AB, so we're closer to A. Well, 1/4 is less than halfway. So therefore, we want to do the 1/4 from A. If it said 1/4 of the way closer to B, then we would want to do 1/4 from B, because that would mean 3/4 from A. So we're working from A, so we're back to doing our right 15 and up 10. We're going to do 15 times 1/4 and 10 times 1/4. So take a minute, put that in the calculator, 15 times 1/4. And you should get 15/4. For these, it is easier to have either a decimal or a mixed number. So if you want to convert that to a decimal, here's what you need to do. Scroll up and highlight the 15/4. Hit enter to bring it down, and then do control enter. And that will switch it to a decimal. So don't just automatically hit control enter, because sometimes that'll get you the wrong answer. You have to scroll up one to highlight the 15/4, hit enter to bring it down, and then when you see the 15/4 down below, then you can do control enter, because that's going to give us 3.75 then. Doing a similar idea here, if you put that in with fractions, you'll get 5/2. Scroll up and select the 5/2, hit enter to bring it down in your calculator, and then do control enter, and that will switch it to a decimal. So that's going to give us 2.5. Well, just as a reminder, A's coordinate was negative 3, 3. So we're starting with negative 3. If we're moving right, that's going in the positive direction. So we'll have plus 3.75, and that's going to end up giving us a positive 0.75. The y value, we started with 3. We're going up, so that's in the positive direction. So we'll do plus 2.5. So that's going to give us 5.5. And let's see if that seems reasonable. 0.75 is about here. If we go up, it looks like that's at about 5.5. So that does seem reasonable. Now, you're not necessarily always given a grid on these questions. So if you're not, just draw yourself your own XY axis and put your tick marks in evenly spaced out. Well, now we want 1/4 of the way closer to B. Well, 1/4 again is less than a half. If, let's say it said 3/4 of the way from B, but closer to A. Well, 3/4 of the way from B is really 1/4 of the way from A. So just keep in mind, make sure you're closer to the proper one. So if we're starting from B, we're going to have the left 15 and down 10. And we've got the same numbers as we had in the last one. So we know times 1/4 is going to give us 3.75. And we know times the 1/4 for the 10 will give us 2.5. So as a reminder, B's original point was 12, 13. So we'll start with 12. If we're moving left, that's in the negative direction for x's, so that'll be minus 3.75. And when we do that in the calculator, we get 8.25. Start with the y of 13. We're going down. Down in the y direction means you're going in the negative direction, so we'll subtract 2.5, and that'll give us 10.5. We'll go over to our picture, make sure that seems like a reasonable answer. 8.25 would be about here. If we go up, it does seem that that's at about 10.5. All right, moving over to page 36. So we want to find a point on a directed line segment from -4,5 to 12,13, and we want to divide it into a ratio of 1 to 3. So let's talk about a few things there. First off, what's a directed line segment? Directed line segment means we should be starting at the first point they give us and heading towards the second point. So when we do our motions, we should do however we have to move from the first point to the second point. So that's what a directed segment means. The other thing that's new here is our ratio. If you have a ratio, it means on one side of your point, you're going to have one part, and the other side, you're going to have 3 parts. So that means altogether there are 4 parts. So the fraction we want to work with here is really 1/4, because your fraction should be the number of parts for the first thing out of how many total parts. So it's 1 out of 4 total parts when you put them together. So that's why we want it to be 1/4. So a slightly different way of giving a partitioning problem. So this one, we've got to draw our own XY axis. Notice the 12 and 13 are kind of big, so we probably want to shift our y-axis over a bit so we have enough to go 12 right, and we also need to be able to go 13 up, so probably shift your x-axis down a little bit as well. So we got our -4, 5 there. And there's our 12, 13. Use your straight edge, so the side of your calculator or some other straight edge, to connect those 2 points. So we're starting at the -4, 5. So either on the graph, count and see how you're moving. We're definitely going to the right. So you can either count, or -4 to the y-axis is 4, and then you got to go 12 more, so that's 16 to the right. 5 to 13, that means we are going up 8. We said we had 1/4, so we're doing right 16 times 1/4, and up 8 times 1/4. Stick those in the calculator, and we get that we're moving right 4 and up 2. Well, we started from -4, 5, so we'll do -4. To the right is the positive direction, so we're adding, and that gives us 0. We started from the y value of 5, we went up, that's the positive direction, so we're adding the 2, that gives us 7. So we got 0, 7, and let's see if that's reasonable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. It does look like that's reasonable. If it's not on your line segment, then you did something wrong, so go back and check your work. So same directed line segment, now we want to divide it into a ratio of 1 to 7. So this means from the -4, 5, we want to have 1 part out of how many total parts? Well, left of our point will be 1 part, right of our point will be 7 parts, so that's 8 total parts. So we're going to do a similar thing to above, but we're just doing it with 1/8. So we'll still have right 16 and up 8. We're just now going to multiply those each by 1/8. 16 times an eighth will give us 2 in our calculator. 8 times an eighth will give us 1. We started at -4. We went right 2. Right is the positive direction. So we'll add. So that's going to give us -2. We started with 5. We're going up. So we'll add. We're adding 1. So that gives us 6. And if we check to see if that's reasonable, here's -2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That does look like it's on the segment, so it looks like we should be in good shape. All right, one last one. We've got 2 points, 10, 10, and 0, 4 for P and Q. So let's go ahead and plot those. And we'll make sure to label each of them and use your straight edge to draw in the segment between them. So what we have here is a different way of giving our ratio. They're giving the ratio as a fraction. So R was the point that's somewhere in between. The fraction can also be written like this as a ratio. So it means we've got 7 total parts, or 7 parts out of 10 total. But notice which one went with the 7, PR. So that means starting from point P. So from point P, we're going to go 7/10 of the way. Now, you could also go from point Q and go 3/10 of the way. Either one will get you the same answer. But let's go from P, we'll do 7/10 of the way because there's 7 parts out of 10 total parts. So from P, we've got to move left, and we're going left 10. And then we would have to go down to get to Q, and we'd go down 6. So we're going to do left 10 times 7/10, and down 6 times 7/10. 10 times 7/10 in the calculator comes out nice. That's just 7. Now, if you do 6 times 7/10, you're going to get 21/5. So after you get that, scroll up 1, highlight the 21/5, and hit enter to bring it down. And then do Control Enter to get the decimal form. And for that, we should get 4.2. So remember, we are starting at P, so our X value is 10. If we go left, that means we're subtracting. So 10 minus 7 will give us 3. The Y value also happened to be 10. We're going down, so that's the negative direction, so we're subtracting. 10 minus 4 is 6, minus another 0.2 will give us 5.8. So let's check and see if 3, 5.8 is roughly on there. Here's 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5.8 seems pretty reasonable with that location. So you got one page for homework, page 37. Have a great rest of your day.